Hi everyone, Alexander here for another installment of 30 Days of Symphony, and we just cannot let go of Beethoven. And why not? Because it is his 250th anniversary year now in 2020, and each of Beethoven's 9 symphonies in its own way is a miracle. So this, taken out of order of course by now, is the last of them in our survey. In some ways the most elusive, I'd certainly say the most subtle, his Symphony number 4 in B flat, dating from the year 1806. You know, the older I get, the more I think that every cliche has a grain of truth in it. And you know, we were all brought up in school, you're always told in school that of the Beethoven 9 symphonies, the odd-numbered ones are violent and explosive and full of anger and distress, while the even-numbered symphonies, numbers 2, 4, 6, and 8, are nicer, so to speak, warmer, jollier, more low-key, more serene. Symphonies 1, 3, the Eroica, 5, 7, and 9 are Beethoven, the extrovert, the eternal rebel, while symphonies 2, 4, 6, and 8 are Beethoven is just a regular guy. Well, you know, there is actually some truth to this, and I think it's just basic human nature. You know, there's a reason why in our work with me here for a moment. In our glorious American interstate highway system, you know, the odd-numbered highways like I-95 is vertical. All the odd-numbered highways are vertical, whereas the even-numbered highways like I-94 that crosses the state of Wisconsin are horizontal. There's just a basic common sense, you know, reality behind all of this. I really mean that there's some truth to it. On the other hand, at the same time, there's this other, as you now by now know, that there's this other duality going on in the way Beethoven writes his symphonies. For at the same time, he's sketching out the Symphony number 5 in C minor, that great document of personal struggle. He's almost literally simultaneously writing the Symphony number 4. Again, it's 1805, 1806. It just so happened that he finished the Symphony number 4 just a few weeks before he finished number 5, so it got the earlier numbering. Beethoven's Fourth Symphony is almost, when you think of the third, the Eroica, that gigantic, you know, historic statement, and then again the amazing emotional journey of the Symphony number 5. The Symphony number 4 almost gets just forgotten. It seems like a curious, gentle afterthought. Leonard Bernstein himself, in his own introduction to his famous videoed performance of this with the Vienna Philharmonic in the early 1980s, kind of made, I must say, one of his more facile remarks, in that he commented on how the slow introduction of the first movement is so pensive and mysterious, this kind of groping in the night through these kind of ambiguous chord progressions, not knowing where we're going. And then in his, as he said, I'm not making this up, he then said, the result of this, forgive me, I'm impersonating Leonard Bernstein, the result of this is nothing more than a 4-movement fun fest. He even called it the kind of Santa Claus symphony of the Beethoven symphonies, because it is a rather jolly work. It is, I think, along with the Symphony number 8, Beethoven at his jolliest. It's not unrelated that there are many examples in the symphony where the bassoon, that lovely instrument from the bass instrument from the woodwind section, displays its historic role as the instrument of good humor. However, there's nothing curious, there's nothing strange about this, and I think Maestro Bernstein was being a bit facetious, or just perhaps downright lazy, because this Symphony number 4, you remember yesterday I was talking about how his Beethoven's Symphony number 2 is harking back to his beloved Mozart, the composer whom he worshipped but never got to study with. Symphony number 4 is his last nod back to the world of that alter ego to Mozart of the late 18th century, his own former teacher, Franz Joseph Haydn. There is a late symphony of Haydn, the Symphony number 102, that you may not know of just for the simple reason that it was one of those Haydn symphonies that never got a nickname. But it is probably the most sublime of all of his late symphonies. It too is in that warm, gentle key of B flat major, 2 flats in the key signature, an inherently just warm-hearted key. The keys of the scale, they really do express different colors and different emotions. And that Haydn symphony similarly starts like the Beethoven Fourth you're going to hear in a moment, with this mysterious unison B flat. It's like, the Lord himself brooding over the waters of creation. It's just this serene Pacific Ocean of B flat. And then what follows, again, is this very lyrical, pensive, even somewhat foreboding slow introduction. And then we get a main sonata allegro full of jolliness and high spirits. Like the slow movement of the Second Symphony, and like the slow movement of that Haydn Symphony 102, the slow movement of Beethoven 4 is this seraphic song, this inexpressibly gentle essay in lyricism. It's kind of a combination of a sonata form and what we call a rondo form. A rondo form is where you come up with a beautiful idea and you repeat it again and again, but in between you have other episodical ideas. Beethoven combines that with the sonata form. So it's a rondo where you have these alternating themes, but along the way, he develops that main idea when it makes its reappearances. But the slow movement of Beethoven 4, as the great Hector Berlioz remarked, I'm paraphrasing him very broadly here, but Berlioz was the great French composer, not only a genius composer, but a great music critic. When he was writing about this slow movement of Beethoven 4, he likened it to the work of a carpenter who puts on an addition to your house, and his work is so seamless, so elegant, that when the work is done, it's as if the addition to the house was always there. And this Beethoven by now is such a master of his craft that, notwithstanding the wizardry with which he combines the sonata form with the rondo concept, you don't even know it. You don't even know it's happening because the music itself is so, so sublime. The scherzo of the third movement of this Fourth Symphony is a further development on the hijinks of the scherzo of the Symphony number 2. We again get this leaping, somersaulting idea, musical acrobatics, circa 1806. The finale, again in the tradition of Haydn symphonies, is just a good-humored musical joke. It starts out with this rushing, what we call perpetuum mobile, these constantly rushing notes, played very, very soft, and then there's this glorious, joyous outburst. Again, the music is just an essay in jollity. The music is so joyous and good-humored, but again, there are moments, just listen in the finale for this little fragment of an idea that is played in the first violins, this kind of arching little fragment that's doubled in the flutes, like a cloud with a silver lining. And it is a moment in which just now and then Beethoven is smiling through the tears. So even in this moment of joyousness, there is a sense of melancholy lurking beneath the surface, because as with other symphonies of Beethoven, like the Symphony number 2 and the Pastoral, Beethoven, despite the profound personal and professional stress he was dealing with at this time in his life, Napoleon was still wreaking havoc all across Europe, throwing the entire continent into an economic depression. Beethoven is able to create this beautiful, jolly 35-minute symphony that even 200 years later doesn't cease to soothe our souls. So here, Beethoven's Symphony Number 4 in one of the great documented live performances of all time, the Concertgebouw Orchestra of Amsterdam, with that extraordinary concert hall they have from the late 19th century, in which, as you'll notice, about 1/3 of the audience is sitting actually behind the orchestra. It's one of the quirkiest of the great concert halls of the world. So you'll notice how the conductor has to march through this kind of gauntlet of an audience to get to the podium. It's this great tradition in Amsterdam. It's one of the most acoustically perfect concert halls in the world, and of course the Concertgebouw is one of the world's great orchestras, and here led by one of the great historical conductors, the great and extremely eccentric, but I think one can say genius conductor, Carlos Kleiber. Here again, Beethoven's Symphony Number 4.